Hi, this is Suleiman, and you're watching Team Upside Talks.
Today, we are lucky enough to have Anisa on the podcast. Anisa is going into her final year at LSE studying law. She is the co-founder of Into Law, an organization which offers amazing opportunities, support, and advice to all students interested in studying law at top universities. And today we will be unpacking her journey through education. So without further ado, question number one, Anisa. How would you describe the kind of secondary school you went to?
So I went to a comprehensive state school in northwest London called Bethany Woods. I think one of the main things is it was a girls' school, which to me seems like I don't even think about that, but when I tell people, they're like, oh wow. And I forget that that's quite a big element of it. And I think that had a big influence on my experience of secondary school in general, quite a positive influence. I would also say my school is very green. And what I mean by that is there's a really lovely landscape. And I mean, it's called Bethany Woods, the clue's in the name. We're surrounded by woods, and you've obviously visited the school, so you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think that was quite a big privilege for us to have that kind of surrounding in a state school in particular. But yeah.
That's really interesting. Would you say there was anything what would you say is the most special thing about your school in terms of what made it distinct from, I mean, you've kind of outlined a few factors already, but is there anything particular that comes to mind?
I would say my school's really diverse. I think a lot of London schools tend to reflect, especially state schools, they tend to reflect London. And I would also say it was very engaged with the students' academic achievement. Even though we were a state comprehensive school, my head teacher would kind of run the school as if we were a private school, and she would be very involved in trying to make sure everyone was achieving top grades and going to good unis and stuff like that.
Cool. So moving on, how would you say your attitude towards education changed from the beginning to the end of your time at school?
I think I've always been pretty good at school, and I've just enjoyed reading and it's always been kind of something I just did. I never really thought about it when I was in primary school and stuff like that. And then I think when I got to high school, I started to think of education, particularly GCSEs, as a game where you just have to know the rules and you have to practice, and then if you know the rules, you're going to do well. And it was kind of just okay, I just need to look at the spec, make sure I know everything on there, and then I'll be fine. And I think that really changed when I got to A-levels. And it's probably to do with the fact that the depth you study in A-levels is obviously much greater. And so it meant I had an opportunity to delve into the knowledge a bit more and do extra reading and start to explore ideas that weren't necessarily related directly to the spec. So I think that's how it changed. And I think that's something I've carried on into university as well, obviously.
All right, great. I really like the way you've kind of described it as a game. I guess it makes it sound a little bit more interesting and a bit more exciting.
It made me feel a bit less intimidated if I'm right, I just need to crack the code and then I'll be okay.
Yeah, this is a bit of a tangent, but when it comes to games, do you consider yourself to be quite competitive, or do you think the fact that you looked at it as a game made you more likely to do well at school? Was it? Yeah.
I think probably, yeah. I think it's something to do with not freaking yourself out a bit.
Right.
For instance, this is going to sound a bit silly, but when we would have class tests, I would always say to my teacher, Miss, can you call it a quiz, not a test? And that way, I would feel it's just a quiz, it's not a test. I don't know, I think it's just something to do with mindset, and you need to think about how you're approaching these things, because I did loads of GCSEs. I think I did 13 or 14 GCSEs. So if I thought of it as each individual subject, I think I would have probably gone crazy. So kind of trying to change your perspective, I think really helps.
No, definitely. So when it came to this game of education, of GCSEs, of A-levels, who were some of the mentors that you had that helped you understand the rules of the game, on how to do best in this game of education?
I think my head of year is actually the person who told me it was a game, and that's where I got the idea from. And she was always very involved. Like, she was a mum to us. We used to call her Mama B. So I think everyone kind of felt when they were going through something, or if they felt like they weren't achieving as well, they could go and talk to her about it. And there was quite like an open relationship. Like, her office door was always open, so we always felt like she was there for us. So I would definitely say she was a mentor. I'd also say both of my philosophy A-level teachers were both very profound, as you would imagine philosophy teachers to be. And I think they helped me in the sense that they really challenged me. I think in GCSEs, I just gotten used to people saying like, that's really good, Anisa, like, keep it up. But when I got to A-levels, and particularly in their classes, they'd be like, well, why do you think that? Or they just challenged the things I would say. And I wasn't used to that. And I think that really helped me grow in terms of education.
Okay.
So I'd say them too as well, yeah.
All right, nice. So during your time at school, did you stay from year 7 to year 13?
Yeah, so I stayed at Bellingwood for 6th as well, yeah.
All right, cool. So you were there for quite a bit of time. What would you say was your most proudest achievement at school? Academic, non-academic, it could be anything.
I think my proudest achievement probably wasn't related to academics. I think it was like those moments throughout school, like this would have been in GCSEs and A-levels, where I felt like I was like part of a community, or I felt like I was building something bigger than just like myself. Whether that's through like tutoring. I used to tutor at the school for 3 years and help young students. And when I'd bump into them in the corridor and they'd be like, by the way, I handed in that essay we spoke about and I did really well. Things like that really resonated with me. And I felt like those are things I was most proud of. Or even things like extracurricular activities. So I really enjoyed musical theatre and productions. So I was always part of the school play.
Nice.
And like, that thing has like really nothing to do with education in the sense of like the things GCSEs you come out with, but just being able to be part of like a little group and have something we could do after school and like get away from the classroom was really nice. And I think so things like that, building that kind of community is probably one of the proudest things.
Nice, that's really nice. And I like to think that Team Upside or Into Law, or any of the organizations that we're involved in, try to kind of create that sense of community. Definitely, because 100%. Cool. So that's the nice side of things. Let's move on to the bit more of the less nice type of things. So obviously we all kind of experience failure during our time in education, during our time outside of education. Can you share a story of a time when you failed at school, and like what did you learn from that experience?
For me, the answer is very easy. I can sum it up in one word, and it is maths.
Okay.
I've always had a difficult relationship with maths. I was very happy to be done with it in year 11. I think with maths, basically, it was this kind of thing where I'd just convinced myself that I was terrible, and like I was like, oh, that's it, I'm just terrible at maths and there's nothing I can do about it. And I think it got to like year 10, and I think we had like we were having mocks, and like I got my report and everything was fine, and then I looked at maths and it was like a D, and I was like, okay, interesting. And I feel like it was a wake-up call for me, and I was like, well, I need maths GCSE, like that's one of the main ones you need. And I was just like, I need to like come out of this trance of telling myself I'm terrible at maths, and I just need to try and work at it. And so it kind of just consisted of me going to every maths club there was. I even went to like, we were split up in bands in high school. So I was in the X band and then there was a Y band. I would attend the Y band stuff and they'd all be like, what is she doing here? But I was just trying to find every opportunity. And I think that kind of really paid off. It was just about changing my perspective. And I think sometimes we can like shut ourselves out to things and just like say, well, that's it, I'm terrible at that thing. But after like a lot of practice and just going to teachers again and again, I was able to do well in the end.
That's amazing. So I'm interested to know like where that kind of sense of, I think it's a sense of resilience or like perseverance, just not kind of deciding to just be bad at something, just wanting to improve. Where's the origin of that kind of sense of wanting to improve?
I think it relates to not necessarily knowing what you want to do, but having something that motivates you. And for me, I knew that I was like interested in studying philosophy at A-levels and economics, and I knew I needed a B in maths to do that. And so once like that had sunken in, I was like, well, okay, now I know what I need. And I think that kind of motivated me to like try a bit harder and seek out every opportunity I could. So I think if you can find something that motivates you and makes you want to work hard at something, it can help, especially when you're feeling quite low about it.
Yeah, for sure. And especially like, given that you've painted the school as a place that had a very community orientated kind of culture, I'm sure that would have made it a lot easier to kind of find the support you needed.
Absolutely.
Cool. No,
that definitely helped.
All right, great. That's some really, really good advice there. Moving on to more of the kind of specifics, because I feel like a lot of students that really want to know the nitty gritty of like your revision schedule, etc., etc. So, what GCSEs, and you said you've already mentioned you took like 13, so it's gonna take some time to list them all. But what GCSEs and A-levels did you take, and how did you end up revising for each of those exams, and how did that revision change from GCSE to A-level?
So what I studied, GCSEs, I did triple science, maths, all the like core subjects. And then I did history, Spanish, business, drama. We had like a Latin club after school, and we'd like been attending it for a year, and then they decided to enter us in for an exam. So I got a Latin GCSE as well. I think that's it. And then A-levels, I studied history, philosophy, and English lit.
Nice.
In terms of revision, I mean, GCSEs, when I think back to it, I honestly don't know how on earth like I revised for GCSEs. I think it's the same now for everyone. Obviously, GCSEs, you have such a big number of exams. The main thing is, I would say, is trying to use your mocks to really practice and like just pretend they're the real thing. And I know sometimes that can be quite hard if you've got like other things going on, like coursework and stuff, but if you just try to pretend it's the real thing as much as possible, it can be really helpful, and because it kind of takes the load off when you go on to do the real exams. Also, another thing I would say is, I know loads of people, you kind of either love timetables or you hate them, and I was kind of in between, because I would do the thing where I'd like say, today I want to do X, Y, Z, but I wouldn't like set a time for it, or I wouldn't be like, I need to wake up at 7 a.m. and do this, and then by 9 o'clock I need to be doing this. So I think if you can find a balance to see what works for you, it doesn't have to be like this stringent thing that's not flexible. And definitely look at the spec.
Okay.
Like I said, it's just a game. In GCSEs, yeah, exactly. With A-levels, it kind of changes, because there's a lot more like opportunity to have like independent thought and experiment with ideas. And so for A-levels, I would say, especially with English lit and philosophy, it's very like there's no right or wrong answer. So I would say read as much as you can. Like for instance, with philosophy, we were looking at really complicated questions like, do we exist? Is there a mind? And you're just like, what on earth are they talking about? But it really helped me I bought a book by one of the philosophers we study, and I just read a bit more about like his perspective, and he would also talk about other philosophers and kind of rebut their arguments, and it kind of helped to delve in a little bit deeper. Even though it might feel like, why would I want to look at more information when I can barely grasp what we're doing right now? It kind of helps when you kind of have the background as well. So I think that's how it shifts for A-levels.
Okay, great. I think you've got some really good gems in that response. Especially, so taking it back to the GCSE stuff, I definitely remember, I mean, more in year 11 than year 10, because in year 10 I was just slacking. But in year 11, I tried. You know what? In GCSEs, let me not even speak about GCSEs. I used the advice you gave for GCSEs in AS. So when it came to my mock exams in year 12, I really did try to treat them like the real thing. And I definitely think it helps in the long run. I remember my teacher saying to me that you should get 100% in this exam, because they're going to test you on things that they've taught you. And like when someone says something so blunt to you like that, it kind of does make you like, you mean like introspect and kind of ask yourself, you know what, you're right, I should know all of these answers because they've taught me and they're not really going out there to trick me, so why am I not getting as close to 100% as possible? So yeah, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with your pieces of advice. I'm trying to think. So with is there anything that you want to add for economics or English lit? Because you spoke quite a bit about philosophy. Is there anything that you think really helped you with those two subjects?
With economics, so obviously my other subjects were all essay based, and economics obviously had that element of maths, which, as you know, was very difficult relationship with. So for me, I think it's like pretty much the same for quantitative subjects. It's just do as much practice papers as you can. And honestly, like, I know it's a cliche, but just don't be afraid to ask questions. I was really lucky, to be honest, in AS, because what happened is about 4 of us, our subjects clashed. So they made another class for us. So there was only 4 individuals in the class, which I know, like, that was a massive blessing. And I think that's like probably why I was able to really concentrate and do well. But I did drop economics in A-level because I wasn't going to carry on with that maths. But yeah, I would say just practice papers and asking for help. Like literally, no matter how many times you need someone to just re-explain the same thing, it'll just be worth it in the end. Like teachers are there, they're being paid to help you. So
100%. 100%. All right, great. So let's move on to university stuff. Cool. So when did you decide that you wanted to study law?
I think I started thinking about studying law when I was in year 11, and it kind of came about as I was just like interested in like debating and stuff like that. And I think a lot of the teachers would just say, oh, law would be a good subject for you. So I was just thinking about it, but I didn't really know much about law. Obviously, we didn't study it before. When I got to year 12, I applied for this thing called the Alison Weatherfield program. And it was at LSE, which is my current university. And it was essentially just like mini seminars once a month, or like lectures and stuff like that. And I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, this stuff is really interesting. And I was like enjoying the stuff they were talking about. And I felt like, okay, this could be a subject I'm interested in studying. And I'd say it's difficult to know, especially if it's a subject you've never studied before. It's difficult to know whether you'd actually enjoy it. So if you can like apply, there's so many programs. Like I even did one in summer, like the UCL summer school. There's a lot of programs that you can do which give you a kind of insight, and that can make your decision much easier. But the main thing is I kind of like this idea of studying a subject where it has such real impacts in everyday life. And like I'll be reading a judgment now, and then I'll see in the news like the impacts it's already having on the world. So I think that element of it really pushed me to study law.
Right, nice. And then when it came to choosing universities, I assume that you wanted to go to some of the best unis in the country, so which is why you're at LSE. But were there any other kind of factors that influence your decision making when choosing unis?
I think with law in particular, obviously I did that Alison Weatherfield program, so I was at LSE for a year. I only went in like 6 times, but like throughout the year, and that obviously I was like more engaged in that university in that sense. I think the main thing related to law was I like the way LSE taught the degree. And what I mean by that is it was less focused on like black letter law and just teaching you what the law is, and more focused on like the normative aspects of why do we have this as a law, who decides what makes a good law. And I think that's probably because it's a social science institution, it has that element is more emphasized. So I think that was one of the things. Also just researching, going to open days. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. So we've come to our final question, and it's a bit of an abstract one, but let's take it wherever you want to take it. So what does education mean to you?
This is a difficult question.
I need the philosopher Anisa to come out here.
Yeah, I'll just tap into that. I think education is a whole bunch of things, but I think one of the main things that I think we can tend to forget as well is that it's a really big privilege.
Mm.
And when I was thinking about this question, I remembered one summer when I was back home in Albania, and I was sat in the garden, and one of my nan's friends came over, and she was talking about her daughter who's doing so well at school. And I was like, oh, that's so great. And she was just talking about her, and then she was saying how it's a real big shame that we don't have enough money to send her to university. And I think in that moment, I was just like, oh, wow. I didn't really think about those kind of things, which, it sounds a bit weird because I run a social initiative about getting people into education and stuff like that. But something we have in the UK is, obviously we get student loan, and we're really able to access university more than ever. So I think it's a big privilege, and I think it's important for us to remember that, especially when your late nights in the library, when you're like, this is so hard, why am I doing this to myself? If you remember how many people would kill to be in your position, or how many people applied and didn't get in, it kind of helps you think, okay, no, I applied for a reason and I'm meant to be here and I need to get something out of this. And then the second thing I would say as well is, not to be cliche, but education is power, in the sense that you get to better yourself and understand the world. It's important not to be ignorant and closed off. And I think, so that's the kind of personal development side of it, but obviously as well, there's the practical side of power, in the sense that you can increase your opportunities in life. And I think that's what Into Law is kind of based on, is this idea of empowering students and, showing them that they are in a position where, even though it's hard for some state school students to get into these top universities, they still have this privilege available to them, which they can use if they're given the right tools, and give them that power.
That's amazing. That's a super comprehensive and actually really beautiful answer to the question. So thank you for your time today, Anisa.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. You can find out more about Team Upside by following us on our social media at Team Upside. Take care. See you soon.